And welcome to this edition of From the Top with CEO and Chairman of the Board of ADTRAN, Tom Stanton. ADTRAN designs and develops innovative, high-speed communication solutions that are used by all major wireline and wireless carriers. Tom is also Chairman of the Board of the Telecommunications Industry Association. And Tom, welcome.
Glad to be here.
Before we get started on the industry topics, I want to talk about your tenure as Chairman of the Board of TIA, and I do want to start that conversation with you answering your impressions and your takeaways from TIA 2014.
Good question. I was actually very pleased with it. As you know, and I think maybe some of the people that are viewing this know, TIA has been going through a transition over the last 3 to 4 years. Some people may recall Supercom, and TIA was a big piece of Supercom. And as Supercom wound down, we really started to refocus our effort on what the event should be and how we can actually highlight the strengths of TIA. And I think this last show was fantastic in doing that. I think it was actually the right mix of outside individuals, customers, policy people, vendors, and it was very collaborative. It was the right size, so I was very, very happy with it.
Tom, a lot of good work has been done since you've been chairman. What was your primary focus when you came in as chairman of the board for TIA?
Well, I kind of touched on it. I mean, and it has to do with the fact that TIA historically, and I'd say probably for a decade or so, had been very much dependent upon the Supercom revenue and Supercom being kind of a core foundation to what TIA was about. But in the background, there were a lot of other things that probably offered just as much, if not more, member value, and things like our policy initiatives, things like our standards initiatives. So as we transitioned and TIA basically transformed into this new type of operation, it's been all about getting stability in the operation. It's been about building a platform that we can actually highlight the other aspects of TIA and the real value that they bring to our members. And I've been very happy with how that's happened so far.
Tom, if you could pass something on, or pass the baton, if you will, to the next chairman, what would that be?
I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to. And that is, we'll have a very, very strong foundation. We won't be dependent on any one particular element, like an event. We have solid financial numbers at this point. We have solid membership growth at this point. And I think we have all of the pillars of TIA really operating at a point to where they can stand alone as being able to add significant value to our members.
Let's shift just for a moment, Tom, to industry topics and hot topics, if you will. ADTRAN is in a very competitive space. They're in the networking space. How do you stay competitive when the network's making this major shift from hardware to software-based solutions?
It may not be as apparent to people that are somewhat removed from the industry, but this shift is not a new shift. This shift has been going on for some number of years. There are different names associated with it, NFV or SDN. But that shift towards more software-centric networking has been going on for some time. And similarly, we've been making that shift for some time. If you take a look at ADTRAN's core competencies, they very much center around software. The majority of our engineers today, if you'd looked at our business, let's say 15 years ago, it had been significantly skewed towards hardware design. I would say 90% of our engineers today are software designs and have been that way for some period of time. So we've been, I think, getting ready for this continual migration towards software, and that's really the way I would characterize it. We've also done a couple of, I think, smart acquisitions. We acquired BlueSocket, which was a Wi-Fi-centric NFV company, and have brought them into our portfolio, as well as some other things. So I think we've been able to augment our speed towards this shift towards software with a couple of smart acquisitions.
Of course, ADTRAN sells products and services to both content developer-centric companies and also carriers as well. What's your position, if you have one, on the business arrangements and the controversy lately about these relationships between content developers like Google and carriers out there?
Well, and I may be looking at it here again from a different perspective, but it seems to me no different than the normal supply and demand issue that happens in every other aspect of our economy. Carriers have a supply of bandwidth, and then we have content providers that have a demand for that bandwidth. And typically what happens is there's a crossover point where the two come together and they're able to meet the supply at a price point that the carriers can actually continue to build that infrastructure and offer more supply at a later point. And my sense is that's exactly what will happen here. So my initial reaction would be probably less government oversight over this transition as it happens, or I'd say really as these market drivers evolve, then I would say less government oversight than more.
Tom, you recently, not too recently, but in the latter part of 2013, gave a keynote speech at a conference overseas about the demand for broadband and what's driving that demand, amongst other things that you talked about. What's driving the demand right now for broadband usage?
Well, the key to that speech that I gave was really trying to point out the fact that if you look at all of the different elements associated with content delivery, whether or not that content delivery is for business or for video, entertainment, or whatever that content may be, if you look at the drivers for it, at the end of the day, it boils down to some fundamental laws on our ability to grow processing speed and because of that content and different avenues to be able to reach that content. And if you look at that entire chain, what you'll see is that the access piece is probably the piece that's the farthest behind right now. And my assertion was at that point, and I still fundamentally believe that, and I think we're starting to see this play out, that you would see a significant increase in access investment because it is the probably the least up to speed in regards to the overall delivery chain of content. So my belief is that that's what was happening and that what was going to happen, and I do think that that's actually what's happening right now.
Tom, in that speech you said that it would be hard for your customers to forecast their investment for future business based on the fact that they weren't sure when broadband usage would peak out. Is that a good thing or a bad thing for ADTRAN?
It's a great thing, and then the question is there a peak? I will tell you, and most people will remember this, there was a period of time where you could not imagine using a megabit of data, that was really something that was really for businesses. And today people routinely require in their residences 20 to 100 megabits of data. And it is by no means far-fetched to think that at some point the standard is going to be a gigabit. I think the one thing that we can say is that the real future needs for bandwidth are something that nobody can envision today. And the more we add to that, the more we actually fuel that bandwidth availability, the more we're actually fueling new ways and new applications of being able to use it, which ultimately drives innovation. So I'm not here today to tell you that there is a cap. I truly in my heart believe that there isn't one, because if there isn't a cap, there's really no end to the innovation that can come about.
Tom, you said also in the speech that there's one thing out there that could slow down innovation and the usage of broadband, and that was speed. Can you elaborate on that thought?
Yeah, similar to what I was just talking about. So at the end of the day, no matter how great your application is, no matter how great the content that you've been able to develop, whether or not that's video, whether or not that's 3D video, whether or not that's 4K 3D video, whatever that application may be in the business side or in the residential side, it has to be delivered. And the thing that's really kind of transformed and put a little more focus on real broadband speeds has been that the content has grown larger and larger at the same time that the customers' requirements have gone up. So people are much less today willing to live with a mobility solution that doesn't deliver them the same type of experience, whether or not that's in quality or in speed of access that they can get sitting at home or sitting at their business. So without a doubt, speed will have a huge impact on how these things are adopted in the future.
Tom, as you know, there are a number of policy implications on the telecom industry via some legislation going on and also some regulations out there. Is there one that sticks out to you as an implication, adversely or not, on ADTRAN?
Well, the USF to CAF transition has been something that we've been very much interested in, because we think that there's a whole swath of population here in the US, that is very much dependent upon that being successful. But the one that's probably the most, in the spotlight today is net neutrality. And that goes back to my previous answer or the previous question on how these things should play themselves out in the marketplace.
Tom, I'll finish off by mentioning that one of the big competitive differentiators between ADTRAN and other companies, other like companies out there, was the fact that you not only sell the product, but you also manage that account afterwards. It seems like the rest of the industry is focusing on that aspect as well. Does that decrease that differentiator for you?
Not at all, not at all. I mean, I mean, I think the real key is a lot of companies in our space, and I think in maybe other spaces too, tend to worry about new customer acquisition, probably more so in our space than in many others. They worry about new customer acquisition, and they probably spend a lot less time worrying about ongoing keeping that customer happy. And that's just been at the core of our kind of foundation since the beginning of the company. It is reputationally part of the monikers that people associate with ADTRAN, and I'm real proud of that. So I think, if anything, it's gotten better, and we've been able to differentiate ourselves not only here in the U.S., but being able to bring that type of level of service to international markets has been very positive. So it'll continue to be a strong foundation of what we do in the future.
Tom, TIA really appreciates you coming up here and talking to us. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here, and thank you for the chance.
Thanks, Tom.